Hello everyone, and welcome back to Sleepless Campfire. Tonight, we travel into the forgotten back roads of America, places where light fades, and what remains are stories that refuse to die. The Everglades of Florida stretch across 1.5 million acres of wetland, a vast ecosystem of mangroves, sawgrass prairies, and humid darkness that swallows sound and light alike. Across these hills, rivers, and empty towns are accounts drawn from witness reports, police files, and archived broadcasts, each one verified, recorded, and retold in their own words. The Everglades after sunset transforms into something else entirely, a place where the line between natural and supernatural blurs, where those tasked with protecting this wilderness sometimes encounter things that defy explanation. These are the calls that have echoed through dispatch systems for decades, recorded in official logs yet remaining unexplained. Now let us begin with our first story. It was late October of 2007 when Park Ranger Daniel Mitchell began what should have been a routine night patrol along the Anhinga Trail. At 42 years old, Daniel had spent 12 years with the National Park Service, the last 6 stationed at Everglades National Park. He knew these wetlands like the back of his hand, every alligator sunning spot, every egret nesting ground, every patch of quicksand that could swallow a man whole. The evening began like any other autumn shift in South Florida. Daniel logged his departure from the Royal Palm Visitor Center at 7:15 p.m., noting in his report the unusually high humidity and the gathering storm clouds on the western horizon. His patrol vehicle, a modified Ford Ranger with oversized tires and a winch, carried standard equipment: flashlight, radio, first aid kit, and a rifle for emergencies. The first 2 hours of his shift passed uneventfully as he checked trail markers and documented wildlife activity in his logbook. The Everglades at night possessed its own symphony, the chorus of frogs, the distant splash of alligators, the rustle of unseen things moving through the sawgrass. Daniel found comfort in these familiar sounds, the rhythm of wilderness that had become his life's work. The air grew heavy as the storm approached, the sky turning from deep purple to almost black. Daniel had just passed the Gumbo Limbo Trail junction when his radio crackled with a report of unusual activity near the Taylor Slough campers, claiming to hear voices in the reeds. He acknowledged the dispatch at 9:37 p.m. and turned his vehicle toward the location, noting that the reported area was approximately 3 miles from his current position. The dirt road grew narrower as he advanced deeper into the park, his headlights cutting through thickening fog that rolled across the marshland like ghostly fingers. When Daniel arrived at the campsite at 10:14 p.m., he found 2 couples huddled around a dying campfire, their faces pale in the flickering light. They explained that for the past hour, they had been hearing what sounded like whispers coming from the sawgrass, though the voices spoke no language they recognized. The campers were experienced outdoor enthusiasts who had camped throughout the Everglades multiple times, which made their unease particularly concerning. Daniel conducted a perimeter check, his flashlight beam sweeping across the marsh, finding nothing but the usual wildlife disturbed by his presence. He logged the incident at 10:42 p.m., noting the atmospheric conditions and the credibility of the witnesses, before advising the campers to secure their site and that he would continue monitoring the area. As Daniel drove away from the campsite, the storm finally broke, with rain beginning to fall in heavy sheets. The wipers of his vehicle struggled to keep the windshield clear as lightning illuminated the landscape in brief, stark flashes. It was during one of these flashes that he saw a figure standing motionless in the marsh, approximately 50 yards from the road. Daniel slammed on his brakes, grabbing his flashlight and rifle before stepping out into the downpour. The beam of his light cut through the rain, but where the figure had stood, there was only swaying sawgrass. He called out, identifying himself as a park ranger, but received no response except the increasing howl of wind through the reeds. That's when he heard a soft whispering sound that seemed to come from all directions at once, words in no human language he could identify. The whispers grew louder despite the storm, forming what sounded like questions, though the meaning remained incomprehensible. Daniel felt a cold dread wash over him, a primal fear that had nothing to do with the dangerous wildlife he encountered daily. This was something else entirely, something that defied his understanding of the natural world. He retreated to his vehicle, locking the doors and radioing dispatch to report his location and the strange occurrence. The official incident report filed the next morning noted unusual atmospheric phenomena possibly affecting auditory perception, though Daniel maintained until his retirement that what he heard that night was not a trick of weather or mind. The investigation continued for 3 days, with additional rangers patrolling the area and finding no explanation for what Daniel had witnessed. The campers left the next morning, cutting their trip short and filing a complaint about unexplained disturbances that had kept them awake through the night. Meteorological reports confirmed unusual weather patterns for that evening, with sudden barometric pressure drops and localized fog formations that scientists later attributed to rare seasonal conditions. What was never explained were the recurring reports over the next 5 years from different visitors and rangers who described hearing similar whispers in that same stretch of marshland, always before or during storms, always in languages no one could identify. Daniel Mitchell transferred to Yellowstone National Park in 2010, citing personal reasons, though in private conversations with colleagues, he admitted that something in the Everglades had fundamentally changed his relationship with the wilderness he had once loved. The official report remains in the park's archives, filed under Unexplained Auditory Phenomena, with a note added in 2015 that similar reports continued to come in, though less frequently. No trace was ever found of what whispered in the reeds that stormy October night. It was just after midnight on March 3, 2012, when Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission officer Maria Hernandez received the call that would become the most perplexing case of her career. At 28, Maria was relatively new to the Everglades region, having transferred from the Florida Panhandle just 6 months prior. The call came from dispatch reporting an overdue airboat tour near the Shark Valley Visitor Center. A commercial tour operated by Glades Adventures had failed to return by its scheduled 11 p.m. check-in. The tour consisted of the boat's captain, 56-year-old James Gator Thompson, a 30-year veteran of Everglades tourism, and 4 tourists, 2 couples from Ohio celebrating anniversaries. Maria logged the call at 12:17 a.m. and immediately headed to the boat launch, where she found the company's owner waiting anxiously. Thompson had a spotless safety record and was known for his conservative approach to tours, never taking unnecessary risks regardless of how experienced his passengers might be. The weather that evening was clear and calm, with temperatures in the mid-70s and minimal wind-perfect conditions for a night tour. The tour had departed at 8:30 p.m. for what should have been a 2-hour excursion through the Sawgrass Prairie, with Thompson promising sightings of alligators and nocturnal wildlife under the full moon. Maria coordinated with the Collier County Sheriff's Office to launch a search operation, bringing in 2 additional airboats and a helicopter with thermal imaging capabilities. The search area encompassed the standard tour route, a 15-mile loop through the Shark River Slough, one of the deepest and widest waterways in the Everglades. By 3 a.m., as the search intensified, Maria noticed something peculiar on the marine radio intermittent static that seemed to form patterns, almost like Morse code, though no one could decipher any meaning in the breaks and bursts. The helicopter pilot reported seeing unusual light fluctuations on the western edge of the search area, though thermal imaging revealed no heat signatures that would indicate human presence. As dawn approached, the search party grew increasingly concerned. Thompson knew these waters better than anyone. If anyone could survive a night in the Everglades, it was him. Yet, there was no sign of the airboat or its passengers, no debris, no disturbance in the water, no indication of where they might have gone. The only clue was a faint transmission picked up by the Coast Guard station at 2:43 a.m., what sounded like Thompson's voice saying something about the lights before the transmission cut to static. The search continued for 5 days, expanding to cover over 200 square miles of Everglades wilderness. What made the disappearance particularly baffling was the complete absence of physical evidence. Airboats leave distinctive tracks in vegetation and water, yet no trace of Thompson's vessel was found despite extensive aerial and ground searches. The tourists' families arrived from Ohio, providing investigators with photographs from earlier in their vacation, smiling couples enjoying the Florida sunshine, completely unaware of the nightmare that awaited them. Maria interviewed other tour operators who had been on the water that night, learning that several had reported unusual electromagnetic interference with their equipment around 10 p.m., though none had seen or heard anything from Thompson's group. The National Weather Service confirmed no unusual weather patterns or atmospheric disturbances that could explain a sudden disappearance. The most unsettling testimony came from a wildlife photographer who had been camping near the search area. He reported seeing strange lights hovering over the western marshland around 10:30 p.m., silent, pulsating orbs that moved in patterns unlike any aircraft or natural phenomenon he had ever witnessed. His testimony was initially dismissed until other witnesses came forward with similar accounts. The investigation officially concluded after 3 weeks, with the case file remaining open but inactive. Thompson's airboat was registered as lost with the U.S. Coast Guard, and all 5 individuals were declared legally dead after the standard waiting period. What troubled Maria most were the details that emerged in the following months. 2 separate fishermen reported finding personal items belonging to the tourists, a camera, and a piece of jewelry in locations nearly 20 miles apart, with no logical explanation for how they got there. The camera's memory card was corrupted beyond recovery, though technicians noted unusual patterns of data degradation inconsistent with water damage. Most disturbing were the reports from other airboat operators who continued to experience radio interference in that same area of the Shark River Slough, sometimes hearing what sounded like fragments of Thompson's voice mixed with the static. Maria Hernandez transferred to the Florida Keys in 2014, though she continued to follow the case through unofficial channels. In 2018, a new witness came forward, a biologist conducting research in the Everglades, who reported finding unusual metallic fragments in the marsh where the disappearance occurred. Analysis revealed the fragments to be composed of materials not identifiable through standard metallurgical testing. The case remains officially unsolved, with Thompson's airboat and its 5 passengers vanished without a trace. No explanation has ever been offered for the lights seen that night or the voice fragments that occasionally still break through the static on marine radios in that section of the Everglades. It was approaching 2 a.m. on November 9, 2015, when Park Ranger Sarah Chen experienced what would later be documented as the Silent Hour incident. Chen had been with the Everglades National Park Service for 3 years, working primarily night shifts to accommodate her chronic insomnia. The evening had been unremarkable. She'd processed a few late arrivals at the Flamingo campground and conducted routine perimeter checks along the coastal prairie. At 1:47 a.m., Chen parked her vehicle near the Eco Pond, a popular birdwatching spot during daylight hours, but eerily deserted at night. She stepped out of her truck to stretch her legs, the humid air heavy with the scent of mangrove and salt water. The night sounds of the Everglades surrounded her, the rhythmic chorus of tree frogs, the distant splash of feeding manatees, the occasional call of a night heron. Chen noted in her logbook that the tide was unusually high, with water levels approaching the base of the observation deck. As she prepared to return to her vehicle, something shifted in the soundscape around her. The tree frogs, which had been deafening moments before, fell silent simultaneously. Within seconds, all natural sound ceased. No insects, no birds, no splashing water. The sudden absence of noise was so profound that Chen felt it physically, like a pressure change in her ears. Chen radioed dispatch at 1:52 a.m., reporting the unusual silence and asking if any other rangers were experiencing similar phenomena. The response came through clearly: no other reports of unusual conditions. As she stood by her truck, flashlight in hand, Chen noticed movement near the edge of the pond. What she initially took to be a manatee or large alligator revealed itself to be something entirely different as it moved into a patch of moonlight. The creature was approximately 8 feet long, with gray, leathery skin that seemed to absorb rather than reflect light. It moved through the water with an unnatural smoothness, leaving no wake or ripple despite its size. Chen had spent years studying the wildlife of the Everglades and could identify virtually every creature that called these wetlands home. This was nothing she recognized. The creature raised its head slightly, revealing what appeared to be eyeless sockets, yet Chen felt an undeniable sense that she was being observed. She remained frozen by her truck door, her training and experience providing no protocol for this situation. The creature remained visible for approximately 30 seconds before sinking beneath the surface without a splash, as if the water had simply closed over it. The silence continued for another 20 minutes before gradually returning to normal first, with a few tentative frog calls, then building back to the usual nighttime chorus. Chen completed a thorough inspection of the area, finding no tracks, no disturbance in the vegetation, no evidence that anything unusual had occurred. She filed a detailed report at 3:30 a.m., including sketches of what she had witnessed. The official response was professional but skeptical, with her supervisor suggesting optical illusion combined with fatigue and the unusual stillness of the night. What Chen couldn't explain was the physical evidence. She collected water samples from where the creature had submerged that showed unusual bacterial colonies and mineral content not typical of that area. The samples were sent to a university research facility where preliminary analysis suggested the presence of microorganisms not previously documented in the Everglades ecosystem. Before further testing could be completed, the samples were compromised by refrigeration failure at the lab, leaving only Chen's written observations as evidence of what she had seen. In the weeks that followed, Chen experienced professional scrutiny and quiet whispers among colleagues about her reliability. She maintained the accuracy of her report, despite the pressure to amend it to something more conventional. What lent credibility to her account was the testimony of a group of amateur astronomers who had been stargazing approximately 5 miles from Echo Pond that night. They reported experiencing a similar period of profound silence around 2 a.m., noting that even their equipment seemed to malfunction briefly during that time. One member of the group had captured audio recordings that documented the abrupt cessation of natural sounds and their gradual return. Though they hadn't seen what Chen described, their account corroborated the unusual atmospheric conditions she had reported. Chen continued her patrols with heightened awareness, though she never again experienced anything quite like the silent hour. In 2017, she transferred to the research division of the National Park Service, where she could focus on the scientific aspects of the Everglades rather than patrol duties. The official file on the incident remains open but inactive, categorized under unidentified wildlife sighting. Chen occasionally returns to the Echo Pond on her days off, always hoping for another glimpse of the eyeless creature that moved through the water like a living shadow, though the waters have never revealed that secret again. No trace was ever found of what surfaced in the pond during those silent minutes of that November night. It was December 21st, 2018, the winter solstice, when something extraordinary was captured during a live broadcast from Everglades National Park. The production crew from Wilderness After Dark, a popular nature documentary series, had set up their mobile broadcasting unit near the Pahe-Oke Overlook, intending to film a special episode on the Everglades at night. The team consisted of 6 people: director Michael Torres, camera operators Lisa Chen and Robert Johnson, sound technician David Park, field guide Carlos Mendez, and drone operator Amanda Wright. They had been filming since sunset, capturing the transition from day to night in the Sawgrass Prairie. The broadcast was scheduled to run from 7 p.m. to 10 p.m., with live segments interspersed with pre-recorded footage. The evening proceeded smoothly until 9:17 p.m., when the broadcast captured something that would later be analyzed frame by frame by experts across the country. What began as a routine segment on nocturnal birds took an unexpected turn when the camera picked up movement in the distance. Torres, who had been producing nature documentaries for 15 years, initially dismissed the movement as a deer or wild hog. Chen, operating the main camera, zoomed in to get a better shot, but what appeared on her monitor made her gasp. The figure stood upright on 2 legs, approximately 7 feet tall, with proportions that were neither fully human nor fully animal. It moved with an unnatural fluidity, covering ground in long, gliding strides that seemed to defy normal biomechanics. Park, monitoring the audio equipment, picked up a low-frequency hum that coincided with the creature's movements, though the sound was below the range of human hearing without enhancement. Wright, who had been flying a drone with thermal imaging capabilities, immediately redirected it toward the figure. The thermal camera revealed something even more perplexing. The creature registered at the same temperature as its surroundings, making it nearly invisible to heat detection. As the live broadcast continued, millions of viewers watched in confusion as the documentary team struggled to understand what they were filming. Mendez, the field guide who had grown up in the Everglades, stood transfixed by the monitor, his usual expertise deserting him. "I've seen everything these wetlands have to offer," he later recalled in an interview. "I've hunted gators since I was old enough to hold a rifle. I've tracked panthers through these marshes. But what I saw that night, it doesn't belong here. It doesn't belong anywhere I've ever been or read about." The creature moved closer to the production team's location, stopping approximately 200 yards from their equipment. It stood motionless for nearly 3 minutes, apparently observing them, though no eyes or facial features were discernible, even with the camera's maximum zoom. Then, without warning, it turned and moved away with the same unnatural speed, disappearing into the darkness within seconds. The production team stood in stunned silence for several moments before Torres remembered they were still broadcasting live. He quickly signed off with a brief explanation about unusual wildlife activity before cutting to pre-recorded footage. It was August 14, 2003, when the routine morning patrol discovered something impossible at Ranger Station 7, a remote outpost in the heart of Everglades National Park. The station had been manned by 2 rangers, Mark Harrison and Elena Rodriguez, who had been with the Park Service for 11 and 7 years respectively. Their last radio contact had been at 9:47 p.m. the previous evening, when they reported all systems normal and signed off for the night. When Ranger David Miller arrived for the morning shift change at 7:30 a.m., he found the station empty. The door was unlocked, a half-empty pot of coffee still warm on the burner, and a logbook open to the previous night's entry. What was missing were Harrison, Rodriguez, their personal belongings, and any sign of struggle or forced entry. The station's vehicles remained parked outside, untouched. The radio equipment was functioning normally, as were all other systems. Miller immediately contacted dispatch, reporting the unusual situation and requesting backup. Within the hour, the park's chief ranger and 3 additional officers arrived to begin what would become the most extensive search operation in the park's history. The investigation revealed several puzzling details. The logbook contained Harrison's final entry made at 9:47 p.m., noting unusual wildlife activity and strange lights in the distance. The entry ended abruptly, as if Harrison had been interrupted while writing. A review of the station's weather instruments showed anomalous readings between 10 p.m. and 2 a.m., sudden barometric pressure drops, temperature fluctuations, and electromagnetic interference patterns that meteorologists could not explain. Most disturbing was the discovery outside the station, a series of circular impressions in the soft ground approximately 20 feet from the entrance. The impressions formed a perfect circle 12 feet in diameter, with vegetation inside showing signs of exposure to intense heat, though no burn marks were visible. Soil samples collected from the area contained trace elements not typically found in Everglades soil, including isotopes of elements that required sophisticated equipment to produce. The search for Harrison and Rodriguez expanded over the following days, eventually covering over 300 square miles of wilderness. What made the disappearance particularly baffling was the complete lack of evidence. No tracks led away from the station, no witnesses had seen or heard anything unusual, and the station's security cameras, which should have recorded any movement, showed only static between 10:15 p.m. and 2:03 a.m., when normal operation resumed. The most compelling testimony came from a fishing guide who had been working approximately 8 miles from the station that night. He reported seeing a series of silent, pulsating lights descending over the area where Ranger Station 7 was located, though he initially dismissed them as military exercises from the nearby Homestead Air Reserve Base. When questioned, base officials confirmed no training exercises were conducted that night. As the search continued, additional witnesses came forward with similar accounts of strange lights and unexplained phenomena in the vicinity of Ranger Station 7. A family camping at nearby Long Pine Key reported experiencing a period of electronic silence around 11:30 p.m., during which their phones, GPS devices, and even flashlights stopped working. The phenomenon lasted approximately 45 minutes before all devices suddenly resumed normal operation. The investigation officially concluded after 6 weeks, with Harrison and Rodriguez listed as missing persons and the case remaining open but inactive. Ranger Station 7 was decommissioned and eventually demolished, though the site remains marked in park records as a location of special interest. What continues to trouble investigators is the evidence that emerged in subsequent years. In 2008, a researcher conducting soil analysis in the Everglades discovered unusual radiation levels in samples collected near the former site of Ranger Station 7. The radiation was not dangerous, but was of a type not naturally occurring in the region. More perplexing were the reports from other park employees who occasionally experienced equipment malfunctions in that area, particularly radio interference and compass deviations that defied logical explanation. In 2015, a hiker found a weathered Park Service badge approximately 10 miles from the former station site. It was Harrison's, showing no signs of damage despite having been exposed to the elements for 12 years. The badge was found in an area that had been thoroughly searched during the initial investigation, leading some to speculate that it had been placed there recently. The disappearance of Mark Harrison and Elena Rodriguez remains one of the most enduring mysteries of Everglades National Park, with no trace of them ever found, despite decades of searching and speculation. No explanation has ever been offered for the circular impressions, the anomalous weather readings, or the period of electronic silence that coincided with their disappearance. It was June 3, 2010, when Florida Wildlife Officer Rebecca Turner encountered something that would challenge her understanding of the Everglades and its inhabitants. Turner had been responding to a report of illegal night fishing near the 9-Mile Pond when her patrol boat's engine suddenly died. At 11:42 p.m., she radioed dispatch to report mechanical failure and her location approximately 2 miles from the boat launch. While waiting for assistance, Turner heard what sounded like children laughing coming from the mangroves along the shoreline. Her initial thought was that campers from a nearby site were out after curfew, but as she listened more closely, she realized something was wrong. The laughter had an eerie quality to it, higher in pitch than normal human laughter and with a rhythmic pattern that seemed almost musical. Turner grabbed her flashlight and directed it toward the sound, sweeping the beam across the water's edge. What she saw made her question whether she was hallucinating from exhaustion. 3 small figures stood partially submerged in the shallow water near the mangrove roots. They appeared to be children, approximately 3 to 4 feet tall, with pale skin that seemed to shimmer in the moonlight. Their features were difficult to distinguish clearly, but Turner could make out unusually large eyes that reflected her flashlight beam with an unnatural green luminescence. The figures moved with a strange grace, their lower bodies remaining underwater as they seemed to glide rather than walk through the shallows. Turner called out, identifying herself as a wildlife officer and asking why they were out so late. The laughing stopped immediately, and the 3 figures turned their heads in unison to face her. What happened next chilled Turner to her core. The 3 figures simultaneously tilted their heads at identical angles, a movement too synchronized to be natural. They then began moving toward her boat, still partially submerged, but advancing with a speed that defied the resistance of the water. Turner reached for her radio to call for immediate assistance, but found it dead, despite having worked moments before. She tried to restart the boat's engine, which suddenly roared to life without hesitation. As she accelerated away from the shore, Turner looked back to see the 3 figures standing at the water's edge, watching her departure. What she noticed in that moment was their hands. They were webbed, with long, slender fingers that ended in what appeared to be small claws. The figures remained motionless until Turner's boat rounded a bend in the waterway, blocking them from view. When she finally reached the boat launch, Turner found her radio working perfectly, as was the boat's engine. She filed a detailed report that night, though she struggled with how to categorize what she had witnessed. The official response was professional but skeptical, with her supervisor suggesting she might have seen manatees or dolphins in the poor lighting conditions, combined with fatigue and the natural tricks that darkness plays on the mind. It was October 31st, 2016, Halloween night, when commercial fisherman Juan Ramirez experienced something that would haunt him for years to come. Ramirez had been fishing the waters near Cape Sable since he was a teenager, knowing every channel, sandbar, and fishing spot in the area. At 10:17 p.m., he was preparing to head back to the marina when he noticed something unusual, a small fishing boat approaching his position without running lights, which was both dangerous and illegal. Ramirez watched as the boat drew closer, estimating it to be an older model skiff, possibly from the 1970s or 1980s. As the boat passed within 50 yards of his vessel, Ramirez called out on his marine radio, warning the operator about the missing lights. The response came not through the radio but directly across the water, a voice that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once, saying something in a language Ramirez couldn't understand. What troubled him most was that despite the boat's proximity, he could see no one aboard it, yet it maintained a steady course and speed. Ramirez followed the mysterious boat for approximately 10 minutes, keeping his distance but observing it carefully. The vessel moved with an unnatural smoothness, creating no wake or sound despite its apparent speed through the water. The moon was nearly full that night, providing clear visibility, yet Ramirez could make out few details of the boat beyond its general shape and age. What he did notice was that the boat seemed to shimmer slightly at times, as if heat were rising from its surface despite the cool night air. When Ramirez tried to illuminate the boat with his spotlight, the beam seemed to pass through it rather than reflect off its surface. At this point, Ramirez began to feel a deep unease that had nothing to do with the normal dangers of night fishing in the Everglades. This was something else entirely, something that defied his understanding of physics and reality. He decided to return to the marina, watching as the phantom boat continued westward toward the Gulf of Mexico. The next morning, Ramirez reported his encounter to the marina manager, who initially dismissed it as a Halloween prank or an optical illusion. What changed his perspective was when two other fishermen came forward with similar accounts. One had seen the same mysterious boat near East Cape, while another had encountered it near the Shark River. All three reports described an older model skiff moving without running lights, creating no wake, and appearing semi-transparent when illuminated. The most unsettling detail was that all three fishermen reported hearing a voice speaking in an unknown language, though none could explain how the sound was transmitted without visible occupants on the boat. The marina manager forwarded the reports to the Coast Guard station in Key West, where they were logged but not actively investigated due to lack of concrete evidence. What makes the phantom boat particularly intriguing is the historical context that emerged after the 2016 sightings. Research into local maritime records revealed that a similar vessel had been reported in the same area as far back as the 1950s, with descriptions matching what Ramirez and the other fishermen had witnessed. Even more puzzling were the reports from Miccosukee and Seminole tribal members who spoke of ghost boats that occasionally appeared in the waters near Cape Sable. According to their oral traditions, these vessels were manifestations of spirits that had been lost in the Everglades, sometimes appearing to warn of danger or mark significant events. The tribal accounts noted that the boats were most likely to be seen during times of transition or change, though what constituted such times remained deliberately vague. In the years following the 2016 sightings, additional reports of the phantom boat continued to come in, though they remained rare and widely scattered. The most credible account came in 2019 from a team of biologists conducting research in the area. Their equipment registered unusual electromagnetic readings as the boat passed nearby, though visual confirmation was limited to a grainy image captured on a motion-activated camera. The image showed what appeared to be a semi-transparent vessel moving through the water, though details were insufficient for positive identification. Ramirez continued fishing the waters of the Everglades until his retirement in 2020, though he never again encountered the phantom boat. No trace was ever found of the vessel that moved through the water that Halloween night, though the stories of ghost boats continue to circulate among those who make their living on the waters of the Everglades. It was January 15, 2019, when wildlife biologist Dr. Eleanor Vance recorded the event that would come to haunt every year of her career afterward, an encounter so strange and so meticulously documented that even her harshest academic critics could not fully dismiss it. The night had begun like countless others in her 15 years of nocturnal field research in the Everglades. Quiet, still, threaded with the subtle murmurs of life in a fragile and ancient ecosystem. Vance specialized in analyzing the nighttime flight calls of migratory birds, a discipline that required both patience and an attunement to sound most people never notice. To her, the Everglades at night was a symphony, but nothing in her background prepared her for what she detected that early morning. At 2:13 a.m., her array of parabolic microphones and spectrographic software captured something anomalous, something outside the range of any bird or mammal she knew. Instead of the expected chirps, trills, and echoes of wings slicing through humid air, her equipment picked up a low-frequency hum, subtle at first, but rising steadily. It resembled the sound of a massive herd moving across a landscape, but with a rhythmic, deliberate structure. Large mammals in the Everglades rarely moved in groups unless forced by fire or panic, and certainly not in the dead of night. And this sound, whatever it was, carried a cadence, like steps taken in unison. Frowning, Vance leaned over her laptop, watching the waveform unfold into a perfect sequence of pulses so regular they resembled engineered signals rather than natural activity. She adjusted the filters, eliminating wind noise and distant thunder. Yet the hum remained, steady as a heartbeat. She checked her backup equipment. It registered the same pattern. She turned off the fans, the lights, even held her breath. Still there, a deep, thrumming vibration that should not have existed. Her research station, a small isolated cabin near the Pineland Trail, was surrounded by thick wetland vegetation, its wooden foundation raised above the marsh on stilts. Vance grabbed her thermal imaging camera, slung her field radio across her shoulder, and stepped outside into the crisp night air. For South Florida, the cold snap was unusual, with temperatures drifting into the low 50s. The sky was pristine, a dark bowl peppered with stars. The moon hung low and sharp, illuminating the sawgrass and the mangrove silhouettes. She switched on the thermal camera and swept it across the wetlands. She expected random areas of heat where deer or hogs might gather. Instead, she froze. There, moving steadily through the marsh, were dozens of heat signatures, 20, 30, maybe more, each about the size of an adult human. They were grouped tightly, walking upright, moving at a consistent pace. But it was the precision of their movement that made her skin prickle. They marched not like animals, but like coordinated units. Every few seconds, their formation subtly adjusted, maintaining spacing so perfect it reminded her of military exercises. Yet these heat signatures flickered at the edges. Parts of them appeared faint, almost translucent, as though they were not fully solid. She focused the lens, adjusting the gain. The shapes became more defined, but still carried that impossible transparency, with background vegetation faintly visible through their bodies. They lacked the bright, distinct outlines living animals usually produced on thermal imaging. Something about them was wrong in a way she could not articulate. Vance radioed her research assistant, Talia, stationed 3 miles east with additional audio monitors. "Are you getting anything unusual? Low-frequency resonance? Maybe a mammal herd?" After a brief pause, Talia responded, "Yes, something big is moving. But Eleanor, I can't hear it with my ears. Only the equipment picks it up. Vance felt the hair on her arms rise. Same here. Keep recording. I'm going to follow at a distance. She moved carefully through the sawgrass, her boots sinking slightly into the marshy terrain. The thermal camera revealed the silhouettes ahead, moving southwest, never breaking formation, even as they passed through waterlogged areas and dense patches of mangroves. They moved with unnatural efficiency. No stumbling, no hesitation, no variation in pace. As she trailed them, she noticed the temperature around her dropping further. Her breath formed faint clouds. The Everglades rarely dipped this low even in winter, especially not suddenly. The hum grew slightly louder through her equipment, though she still heard nothing with her ears. She began to feel a faint pressure in her chest, as if the vibration were resonating through her body instead of through the air. For nearly an hour she followed, documenting everything. She spoke timestamps into her recorder. She zoomed in on individual figures, noting the consistent height, approximately 6 to 7 feet. The thermal data showed no distinction between head, torso, or limbs. The shapes were smooth, uniform, and ghost-like, with their heat diffused through their entire form rather than concentrated like a biological organism. Then something happened that made Vance stop in her tracks. One of the figures paused, turning slightly as if aware of her. It did not face her exactly. Its body lacked enough definition for her to determine orientation, but something in its movement suggested awareness. The hum dipped, forming a pattern almost like a response. Vance instinctively dimmed her camera screen, crouching low. After a tense moment, the figure turned back and resumed marching. She exhaled slowly. "Talia, are you seeing changes in the waveform?" One figure paused. On the radio, Talia's voice trembled. "Yes, Eleanor. The frequencies changed. They're forming something. Patterns. Maybe communication." Vance continued after them, keeping farther back now. The group moved steadily southwest, crossing terrain that should have slowed them: deep water, thick sawgrass, uneven limestone. But nothing impeded them. Not once did they break formation. By 4:06 a.m., the wetlands began transitioning into a coastal mangrove region leading toward the Gulf of Mexico. Vance's thermal display showed the figures moving toward the shoreline. She quickened her pace, breath visible in the frigid air. When she reached a small dune overlooking the coast, she raised the thermal camera again and stared in disbelief. The figures were walking straight into the Gulf. They did not swim, did not hesitate, did not react to the cold waves crashing against them. They simply continued their march, sinking beneath the surface, one by one. Their heat signatures flickered like dying embers as they descended out of view. There was no splash, no disruption. The ocean accepted them silently. Vance stood there shivering, staring at the dark water. She waited an hour, scanning the horizon, checking and rechecking her equipment. Nothing reappeared. When she returned to her research station at dawn, her first instinct was to transfer all her recordings to backup drives. But when she opened the audio files, her heart sank. Every file related to the event had been corrupted. The spectrograms were gone, replaced by static and blank data fields. But the thermal footage survived. Clear images, grainy but unmistakable, showed dozens of humanoid shapes moving through the Everglades at 2:13 a.m., marching in formation toward the sea. She filed a detailed report with her institution, accompanying it with the video evidence. The administrative response was cautious: optical anomaly, temperature inversion, possible equipment malfunction. Behind closed doors, a few colleagues suggested she was overtired, overworked. But none could explain the thermal patterns. None could explain why the corrupted audio files erased only the event window, not the hours before or after. When Vance met privately with Talia later, the young assistant admitted something she hadn't put in her report. "The frequencies," she whispered. "They weren't random. They were structured, almost mathematical. And when that one figure turned, the pattern shifted like it acknowledged us." 2 years passed. Vance continued her research with heightened vigilance. She saw unusual things often: strange heat blooms, distorted movement patterns, but nothing like that January night. In 2021, another research team reported similar anomalies near the same region: coordinated heat signatures, rhythmic low-frequency hums, and small glitches in audio recordings. Their visual footage was incomplete but corroborated the formation patterns Vance had described. In 2022, Vance published a paper on unexplained thermal phenomena in subtropical marsh ecosystems, carefully avoiding the supernatural implications of her true experience. It discussed unusual coordinated heat patterns, nocturnal migration anomalies, and unexplained waveform distortions. It made waves among biologists and physicists, but Vance said nothing publicly about the translucent figures or the march into the Gulf. Privately, she wondered whether what she saw was a natural phenomenon yet unidentified, or something entirely outside biological life. She never solved it, and no trace of the beings that disappeared into the ocean that night was ever found. But every year since, 3 to 5 reports from field researchers surface, quietly, informally, describing coordinated nocturnal movements, strange hums, flickering heat signatures, and the unmistakable feeling of being watched by something both present and impossible. The Everglades remember, and whatever walked into the Gulf still walks somewhere. The American landscape remains vast and unknowable, nowhere more so than in the sprawling wilderness of the Everglades. These wetlands, covering much of southern Florida, have long been a place of mystery and wonder, where the line between natural and supernatural sometimes blurs in the humid darkness. The night patrol calls we've examined tonight represent only a fraction of the unexplained phenomena documented in this unique ecosystem over decades of official records. What connects these disparate accounts is not just their setting, but the sense they convey of something ancient and mysterious, moving just beyond the edge of our understanding. The Everglades have existed for thousands of years, adapting to changing conditions while maintaining their essential character as a place of transition between land and water, between fresh and salt, between the known and the unknowable. Those who work in these wetlands after dark occasionally encounter things that defy explanation, experiences that challenge their understanding of the natural world and their place within it. What emerges from these accounts is a pattern of encounters with phenomena that seem to operate according to rules we don't yet comprehend. The whispering reeds that speak in languages no one recognizes, the airboat that vanished without a trace, the silent hour when all natural sound ceased, the creature that moved through water without leaving a wake. These experiences suggest a reality layered upon our own, occasionally intersecting in ways that leave witnesses forever changed. The park rangers, wildlife officers, researchers, and fishermen who documented these encounters were trained observers familiar with the normal patterns of the Everglades. What they witnessed fell outside those patterns, yet they reported it with the same professional accuracy they applied to all aspects of their work. Their credibility lies not just in what they saw, but in their willingness to acknowledge the limits of their knowledge when confronted with something beyond explanation. The Everglades continue to guard their secrets, revealing them only occasionally and never completely. What we know of these wetlands is dwarfed by what we don't yet understand, and perhaps that's as it should be. There's value in mystery, in acknowledging that our scientific knowledge has boundaries beyond which wonder and speculation must take over. The night patrol calls we've explored tonight remind us that the world remains larger and more complex than our current ability to comprehend it. They suggest that in the darkness of the Everglades, as in other wilderness areas across America, there are phenomena that operate according to principles we have yet to discover. These encounters don't threaten our scientific understanding so much as they expand it, pointing toward new questions and new avenues of investigation. What connects these accounts is not proof of the supernatural, but evidence of the natural world's capacity to surprise and mystify us, even in an age of advanced technology and scientific knowledge. If you or someone you know has a true story to share, leave it in the comments below. The Sleepless Campfire community values first-hand accounts of unexplained phenomena, particularly those documented by professionals working in wilderness areas after dark. Your experiences contribute to a larger understanding of the mysteries that still exist in the natural world, and they help build a record of encounters that might otherwise be lost to time. The Everglades continue to evolve, facing challenges from climate change, human development, and invasive species, yet they retain their essential character as a place of mystery and wonder. As long as there are people willing to venture into these wetlands after dark, there will be stories of encounters that defy easy explanation, adding to the rich tapestry of unexplained phenomena that makes places like the Everglades so endlessly fascinating. Thank you for watching Sleepless Campfire. Until next time, stay safe out there. Out.